The blood trail stretched across pristine snow like a crimson ribbon leading to death itself. At minus 25 degrees, the February blizzard howled through Yellowstone's wilderness, but nothing could drown out the sound that shattered the frozen morning, a wolf's desperate howl. Raw with agony, Sarah Mitchell's weathered hands gripped the steering wheel of her ancient pickup as she followed that terrible cry through the whiteout. She found them in a shallow cave, a white she-wolf, impossibly rare, her swollen belly contracting uselessly. Blood pooled beneath her mangled leg, still clamped in the steel teeth of an illegal trap. Beside her stood a black wolf, his mate, pacing, nudging her with his massive head. When Sarah approached, he didn't attack. Instead, his yellow eyes locked onto hers with an intelligence that stopped her breath. He sat, waiting. Not again, Sarah thought, her granddaughter Emma's dying face flashing before her eyes. I won't lose another one. She had 2 hours, maybe less. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Sarah Mitchell had buried too many she loved. At 62, her hands bore the scars of a lifetime spent trying to save what couldn't be saved, her husband Robert to cancer 20 years ago, her son Michael to heroin addiction a decade past, and 3 years ago, her 7-year-old granddaughter Emma, who died whispering a promise Sarah had yet to keep. The cabin where Sarah lived stood 40 miles from the nearest town, a deliberate exile. After Emma's death, she couldn't bear the sympathetic looks, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered the general store. She took the ranger job at Yellowstone's edge, patrolling the boundary between wilderness and civilization, a border she understood too well. Most days, she preferred the company of wolves to people. Wolves, at least, were honest about their nature. Her son Michael had vanished into James Cooper's ranch 5 years ago. Another loss she'd stopped mourning. The needle had taken him long before he physically left. Sarah had spent $30,000 on rehab centers, watched him steal her mother's wedding ring to buy his next fix, and finally had to choose between enabling his death or releasing him to it. She chose release. He chose to hate her for it. Then came Emma, Michael's daughter, abandoned by a mother Sarah never met, left on Sarah's porch in a car seat with a note, "I can't do this." Emma became Sarah's second chance at motherhood, and for 7 years, Sarah got it right. She was present, attentive, loving, everything she'd failed to be for Michael while working 3 jobs after Robert died. But second chances don't guarantee happy endings. The December ice, the patch Sarah didn't see, Emma's small body thrown against the dashboard, these were the images that haunted Sarah's sleep. 3 days Emma lingered in the hospital, infection spreading through her bloodstream despite every antibiotic. Every prayer on the final night, Emma gripped Sarah's hand and whispered, "Grandma, promise you'll save the wolves like we talked about." They'd watched a documentary together about Yellowstone's wolf reintroduction, Emma's eyes wide with wonder at the white wolf they called Ghost. "I promise, baby girl," Sarah had said. Emma died at 3:47 in the morning. Sarah had been holding her when the monitor flatlined. The medical bills, $47,000, still arrived monthly, eating away at Sarah's Social Security and ranger salary. She lived on canned soup and drove a 1998 pickup held together by rust and prayer. But she'd kept working, kept patrolling, kept watching for the white wolf Emma had loved, and this morning she'd found her, dying, pregnant, trapped by human cruelty. The she-wolf the biologists called Ghost lay bleeding in the snow, her mate Shadow standing guard. Sarah knelt slowly, her own body protesting the back pain she'd ignored, the weight loss she'd attributed to grief, the exhaustion that went deeper than lack of sleep. She didn't know yet about the cancer eating through her ovaries. Didn't know she had months, not years. All she knew was the promise. Sarah had heard the howls at 6 in the morning, unusual for wolves who typically remained silent during daylight hours. But these weren't normal howls. They carried a desperation that raised every hair on her arms. She'd grabbed her emergency veterinary kit, the one she'd maintained from her years as a vet tech in Boston, and followed the sound into the blizzard. The blood trail appeared 200 yards from the road, dark red against snow, so white it hurt to look at. Sarah parked her truck and loaded the tranquilizer gun she kept for emergencies, though in 15 years of ranging, she'd never fired it. Policy was clear: observe, document, do not intervene, let nature take its course, even when nature was brutal. But when she found Ghost, policy became irrelevant. The she-wolf lay in a shallow depression beneath an overhanging rock, her white fur matted with blood and snow. Her sides heaved with contractions that produced nothing but exhaustion. The steel trap clamped around her left hind leg bore the unmistakable brand burned into its chain. Cooper Ranch. James Cooper's illegal traps had killed before. Now they were killing again. Shadow, the black alpha male, paced a tight circle around his mate. When Sarah appeared, he should have charged, should have defended his territory with teeth and fury. Instead, he stopped. His yellow eyes met hers with an intensity that felt almost human, almost pleading. Then he did something Sarah had never witnessed in 15 years of wolf observation. He sat, not a threat posture, not aggressive. He sat and waited, as if he understood she was his last hope. Sarah's hands trembled as she assessed the situation from a careful distance. Ghost contractions were close together, but unproductive textbook dystocia. The cub was stuck, probably malpositioned, without intervention. Both mother and cubs would die within hours. The leg wound had bled for at least a day, judging by the clotted blood. Hypothermia was setting in. Sarah could see the shivering even from 20 feet away. Her radio sat clipped to her belt. One call to headquarters would bring a team, veterinarians, equipment, proper protocols. It would also take 3 hours minimum in this weather. Ghost didn't have 3 hours. Sarah's phone showed no signal. They were in a dead zone, one of many pockets where the mountains blocked service. She could leave, drive until she found reception, coordinate the rescue, leave Ghost and Shadow alone for 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. The wolf would be dead before help arrived. Policy was clear: non-intervention, unless human activity directly caused the injury. The trap qualified, technically, but unauthorized intervention meant suspension, possibly termination. Sarah was already 2 years from retirement, from the pension that would finally let her pay off Emma's medical bills. Lose this job, and she'd lose everything. Emma's face flashed in her mind, not the peaceful death mask the funeral home had created, but Emma in the hospital, eyes bright with fever, saying, "Promise, Grandma, promise you'll save them," Sarah's grandmother used to say. When the Lord gives you a choice between what's right and what's easy, the easy road leads to hell. Sarah had taken too many easy roads. Not this time. She loaded a tranquilizer dart, calculating dosage by eye. Ghost weighed maybe 85 pounds, heavily pregnant, too much sedative, and she'd suppress the contractions they needed. Too little, and the stress of the procedure could kill her anyway. "If you trust me, boy, don't move," Sarah said quietly to Shadow. "I'm trying to help her." The black wolf's ears twitched. He didn't move. Sarah fired. The dart struck Ghost's shoulder. The she-wolf jerked, and Shadow immediately moved between Sarah and his mate. A low growl building in his chest. Sarah froze, hand on the bear spray at her hip, knowing it would be useless if he decided to attack. But Shadow turned back to Ghost instead. He nuzzled her neck, a gesture so tender it made Sarah's throat tighten. Ghost's eyes, clouded with pain, fixed on Shadow's face. Then they rolled back, and she went limp. Shadow looked at Sarah again, stepped aside. She'd been given permission. Sarah moved fast. Ghost's pulse was weak, breathing shallow. The trap's serrated edges had crushed muscle and possibly fractured bone. Sarah worked the release mechanism, her fingers clumsy in the cold, and when the trap finally opened, fresh blood welled up. She applied a tourniquet, started an IV line with the fluid she carried, and gave Ghost an injection of oxytocin to strengthen contractions. Then she examined the birth canal. One cub's head was visible, but positioned wrong, turned sideways. Sarah had done this procedure 100 times on dogs and cats in her clinic days, but never on a wild wolf in a blizzard with the father watching her every move. She repositioned the cub manually, fingers guided by memory and prayer. Ghost's unconscious body bore down. Sarah pulled gently, supporting the cub's head, and suddenly it slipped free into her hands, a wet, gray bundle that didn't move or breathe. Shadow whined, high and desperate. Sarah cleared the cub's airways, rubbed its chest with her coat sleeve, breathed tiny puffs of air into its mouth. Nothing. She tried compressions. 2 fingers on the tiny rib cage, 15 seconds, 30, 45. The cub gasped, cried, a thin haze sound that cut through the wind. Shadow's howl of relief echoed off the rocks. Within seconds, 6 other howls answered from different directions. The rest of the pack, scattered, but listening, waiting for news from their alpha. Sarah had never heard anything like it, a chorus of pure joy that made her weep into the frozen air. But there was no time for emotion. Ghost's body contracted again, and a second cub emerged, this one breathing, then a third, but the fourth wouldn't come. Sarah could feel it inside. Oh, it's stuck fast. This one needed surgery, needed equipment she didn't have, needed miracles she couldn't provide. Ghost's body temperature was dropping toward critical. Her pulse was threading. If Sarah couldn't get her to the wildlife center soon, none of this would matter. The truck sat 200 yards away through 3 feet of snow. Ghost weighed 85 pounds. Sarah weighed 130 and had a herniated disc in her lower back that flared whenever she lifted anything heavier than groceries. But Emma's voice echoed, "Promise, Grandma." Sarah pulled the tarp from her emergency kit and cut branches from nearby pines. She fashioned a crude sled, loaded Ghost onto it, placed the 3 living cubs in her coat pockets against her body for warmth. Shadow watched every movement. "Come on, girl," Sarah grunted, grabbing the tarp's edge. "We've come this far." Sarah fell 6 times, dragging Ghost through the snow. Each time her back seized with pain that made her gasp, made her want to quit. Each time, Shadow appeared ahead of her, breaking trail through the deepest drifts, looking back as if to say, "Keep moving." By the time she reached the truck, Sarah's vision swam with exhaustion. She loaded Ghost into the covered truck bed, placed the 3 cubs beside their unconscious mother, and turned to close the tailgate. Shadow jumped in before she could stop him. "No," Sarah said. "You can't come." Shadow lay down beside Ghost and fixed Sarah with a look that brooked no argument. "Fine," Sarah muttered. "But if you eat me, I'm haunting you." She started the engine, cranked the heat, and began the 90-mile drive to the Yellowstone Wildlife Medical Center. The radio crackled to life as she descended toward lower elevations, and she called ahead to Dr. Helen Richards, explaining what she had, what she'd done, what laws she'd broken. "Sarah, you know I can't authorize this," Helen said, her voice tight. "I'm not asking for authorization. I'm telling you I'm coming. Have the OR ready." 45 miles from the center, at mile marker 47, where the road narrowed between 2 rock faces, Sarah found her path blocked. James Cooper's truck sat sideways across the road. James stood beside it, rifle in hand. A younger man emerged from the passenger side, moving with the awkward gait of someone with a prosthetic leg. Sarah stopped, left the engine running, and climbed out. The temperature had risen to -15, which felt almost warm after the higher elevations. "I know what you've got in there, Sarah," James called out. "Get out of my way, James." James was 55, weathered by wind and grief into something harder than the Montana mountains. "That's the white wolf, the one that killed 6 of my calves last month. She's dying. She's pregnant." "Good." James raised the rifle. 5 more dead wolves means 5 fewer problems for ranchers like me." The younger man limped forward. Sarah noticed his face, sharp cheekbones, hollow eyes, the look of someone who'd survived something terrible. "Let nature take its course," he said. "Isn't that what you rangers always preach? Your illegal trap did this?" Sarah said, focusing on James. "Not nature." James's jaw tightened. "Prove it." "Steel trap, leg hold design, Cooper Ranch brand on the chain. I took pictures. I'm protecting my property, my livelihood." But his voice lacked conviction. Shadow's growl rumbled from the truck bed. James swung the rifle toward the sound. Sarah stepped between the gun and her truck, arms spread. "You'll have to shoot me first. Don't test me, old woman." "Dad, wait," the younger man said. Sarah's head snapped toward him. "Dad?" James's son had died 10 years ago in a wolf encounter. Everyone knew that story. "James," Sarah said carefully, "I know what you lost. Tommy was a good boy." James flinched as if she'd struck him. "Don't you speak his name." "I lost someone, too," Sarah's voice cracked. "My granddaughter, Emma. She was 7 years old." The woods seemed to hold their breath. Even the wind died for a moment. "She died in my arms 3 years ago," Sarah continued. "Car accident. I was driving. It was my fault." The lie came easily now, worn smooth by repetition. She'd told it so many times she almost believed it, almost forgot that Michael had been behind the wheel, high on heroin, that she'd taken the blame to save her son from prison. "Emma loved wolves," Sarah said, "before she died. She made me promise to save them. That white wolf in my truck, Emma and I watched a documentary about her. Emma called her Ghost. She thought Ghost was magic." Tears froze on Sarah's cheeks. "I couldn't save Emma, But maybe I can save this family. Please, James, please let me try." James's rifle lowered slightly. His face worked with emotion he'd probably spent years suppressing. "You don't understand," he said finally. "Tommy didn't die from a wolf bite." Sarah waited. "He was trying to protect the cattle. Wolf bit his leg, not deep, but Tommy panicked, ran, didn't tell me for 2 days because he was afraid I'd be angry about the cattle we lost." James's voice broke. "By the time he showed me, infection had set in, cellulitis, then sepsis. I held him in the hospital while his organs shut down. He was 18 years old. The younger man, Michael." Sarah suddenly realized, recognizing features she'd tried to forget, stared at the ground. "And my wife, Margaret," James continued, "she blamed me, said I cared more about cattle than our son. The grief, it did something to her mind. Early onset Alzheimer's, the doctor said, but I know it was losing Tommy. Last 2 years of her life, she didn't recognize me, so they kept asking for our boy. I'd tell her he was gone, and she'd grieve like it was the first time, every single day." James looked at Sarah with eyes that had seen too much death. "So you see, letting that wolf die, that's not revenge. That's justice for what they took from me." Sarah stepped closer, lowering her arms. "Justice or just more death? Would Tommy want this? Would Margaret?" "I don't know what they'd want," James shouted. "They're gone, both of them, gone, and I'm still here. And every day I wake up and remember they're not coming back." "I know," Sarah said quietly. "Every morning I wake up and Emma's not there. Her room is exactly how she left it. I still set 2 plates for dinner sometimes. Just for a second, I forget." Michael moved then, touching James's arm. "Dad, let her go." James looked at the young man he'd taken in, this broken addict who'd shown up at his ranch 5 years ago looking for work, anything to escape whatever demons chased him. "Please," Michael said. "She wants to save them so badly." "Fine, let her. But when that wolf kills someone else's kid, when another family gets destroyed, that's on her conscience, not ours." His eyes met Sarah's, and something passed between them, not recognition, but a shared understanding of what it meant to carry unbearable guilt. James lowered the rifle completely. "Go it," he said. "But this changes nothing. Those wolves are still a menace. And when the Park Service hears what you did, you'll lose everything, your pension, all of it. For what? For an animal that would kill you without a second thought." Sarah climbed back into her truck without answering. As she pulled around James's vehicle, she glanced in the rearview mirror. Michael stood in the road, watching her drive away. And for just a moment, she saw the 10-year-old boy he'd been before the world broke him. 45 miles later, the Wildlife Center appeared through the snow, a modern facility built at the park's edge, straddling the line between wild and civilized. Helen Richards stood outside with 2 vet techs, a gurney, and an expression that said she'd made a decision she might regret. "OR's prepped," Helen said as Sarah stopped. "But Sarah, the superintendent knows. He's ordered an investigation. You're suspended pending review." "I don't care. You should care. They'll fire you. You'll lose your pension." Sarah thought of the medical bills, the debt, the cancer she didn't know about yet. Then she thought of Emma's face, Tommy's grave, James's rifle, and Michael's hollow eyes. "There are things worth losing everything for," Sarah said. They loaded Ghost onto the gurney. Shadow tried to follow. "No, Helen said firmly. He stays outside. Shadow ignored her, trying to push past. Two security guards moved to block him, hands on tranquilizer guns. Wait, Sarah said. She approached Shadow slowly. Boy, you have to stay here. We'll take care of her, I promise. Shadow looked at Ghost on the gurney, then at Sarah. He made a low, mournful sound. I know, Sarah whispered. But this is how we save her. Trust me. Shadow backed away slowly, then sat in the snow beside the entrance. The 6 other wolves from Ghost's pack emerged from the woods, forming a semicircle 50 yards away. They sat. Helen stared. I've never seen pack behavior like this. They're family, Sarah said simply. Where else would they be? As they wheeled Ghost inside, Sarah looked back. Shadow hadn't moved. His eyes tracked the doors until they closed, shutting him out in the cold. He would wait there for 40 days. The operating room smelled of disinfectant and fear. Ghost lay on the steel table, her white fur matted and stained, her breathing shallow. The ultrasound machine showed what Sarah had suspected, 2 cubs still alive inside, 1 dead. The dead cub had been there for days. Ghost's body trying unsuccessfully to absorb it. That's what had caused the dystocia. Helen Richards studied the monitor with a grim expression. BP 60/40, heart rate 40 beats per minute, temperature 94 degrees. She's critical. Can she survive surgery? Sarah asked. Honestly, 80% chance she dies on the table. Helen looked at Sarah. If we do nothing, she definitely dies. If we operate, we might save the cubs, even if we lose her. As Sarah thought of Emma on a hospital table 3 years ago, surgeons asking her to choose between her granddaughter's leg and her granddaughter's life. She'd chosen life. Emma had died anyway. 3 days later, the infection spreading despite the amputation. Save the babies, Sarah said quietly. Helen's hands were steady as she made the first incision. Sarah assisted. Falling into the rhythm of surgery she hadn't practiced in 15 years. The first cub emerged quickly. A gray male, not breathing. The vet tech performed CPR tiny chest compressions, clearing the airway. 30 seconds passed, 45. The cub gasped, cried. One down, Helen murmured. The 5th cub came next. As Helen lifted it free, Sarah's heart sank. The cub's rear left leg was twisted, the spine curved at an unnatural angle. Spina bifida, possibly, or some other developmental defect. This one won't survive in the wild, Helen said, her voice flat with professional assessment. Will it live? Sarah asked. With intensive care, maybe. But we're talking months of treatment, surgery for the leg, physical therapy, at least $20,000. Sarah thought of her bank account, $3,400, her medical bills, her suspended pay. Then we do it. Helen looked at her. Sarah, who's going to pay for that? I will. Well, somehow, the 6th cub was dead. Had been dead for at least 3 days. Its body had started to decompose inside Ghost's womb, toxins seeping into her bloodstream. This was what had been killing her, not just the difficult birth, but the slow poisoning from within. Helen removed the dead cub, repaired Ghost's uterus, and began closing the incision. The leg wound required another hour setting the broken bone. cleaning the infection, accepting that Ghost would always walk with a limp. Blood pressure stabilizing, the vet tech announced. Heart rate up to 60? She's responding. Ghost surveyed the anesthesia. When they moved her to recovery and placed the 5 living cubs beside her, she stirred, sniffed each one, and immediately began grooming them. The maternal instinct was intact. Against all odds, she'd made it. Sarah stood at the observation window, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was thanking. To God, maybe, or Emma, or the stubborn will to live that some creatures possessed and others didn't. Behind her, Helen said quietly. The park superintendent called. "You're officially suspended without pay pending a full investigation. They're talking about criminal charges for unauthorized intervention." "I don't care. You should care." "Sarah, you'll lose everything." Sarah thought of Emma's promise, of Shadow waiting outside, of the 5 cubs now nursing from their exhausted mother. Some things are worth losing everything for. Outside, Shadow remained at his post. He'd chosen a spot directly in front of the entrance. Lying in the snow that continued to fall, staff tried to move him. He growled. They tried to feed him. He ignored the food. But the next morning, Sarah arrived to find the 6 pack members had come closer during the night. They'd brought Shadow a deer haunch. He'd eaten some, barely enough to sustain him. "They're taking care of him," the security guard said, awed, "like a family does." Sarah began visiting daily. She'd been suspended, but no one had said she couldn't come to the center. She'd sit with Shadow for hours, separated by glass and 20 feet of space, talking to him like a therapist. "You're more loyal than most humans I've known," she told him on day 3. "More loyal than my son." Anyway, the story had gone viral by then. A local reporter had heard about the rescue and published an article, "Woman Risks Everything to Save Pregnant Wolf." Within 48 hours, the video footage from the center's security cameras had been shared 2 million times. News crews from Denver, Seattle, even CNN called for interviews. Sarah refused them all. But the donation started anyway. $50,000 in 3 days, sent to the Wildlife Center with notes, "For Ghost and her cubs, for the woman who kept her promise, for Hope." Hope. That's what Sarah had started calling the deformed cub. It seemed appropriate. By day 5, Ghost's eyes opened. By day 7, she was nursing all 5 cubs regularly. Though Hope struggled more than the others, the cub's twisted leg made it difficult to reach a teat, and Sarah found herself bottle-feeding Hope twice daily to supplement. On day 10, Michael walked through the door. Sarah was in the recovery room, feeding Hope. When the receptionist paged her, "Sarah, someone's here asking for you." She found him in the lobby, and her heart simply stopped. 10 years, 10 years, since she'd seen her son's face. He was 35 now, weathered and thin, with the permanently cautious look of someone who'd survived addiction. He moved awkwardly, and she noticed the prosthetic leg for the first time. "Michael, hello, Mom." The word hung between them like a bridge that might collapse. "What are you doing here? I work for James, remember?" His voice carried an edge. "I've been at Cooper Ranch for 5 years. "I didn't know." Sarah set down the bottle. "I haven't seen you in 10 years, not since I left." Michael looked around the facility, at the photographs of rescued animals on the walls, So this is what you do now. Save wolves. I'm a ranger. Was a ranger. I'm suspended. I heard. He met her eyes finally. Suspended for saving the white wolf, the one that's been killing James' cattle. She was dying. So you broke every rule to save her. An animal, a wolf that would kill you without a second thought. His voice rose. You cared more about that wolf than you ever cared about me. The words landed like physical blows. Staff members in the hallway turned, pretending not to listen. That's not fair, Sarah said. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Michael stepped closer. When I was at my lowest, I called you, begged you for help. You said you couldn't enable me, that I had to want to get clean myself. So I left. And you know who took me and James Cooper, a stranger. He gave me a job, a place to live, a reason to keep breathing. I tried it. Sarah's voice broke. I spent $30,000 on rehab centers. You stole from me. Michael, you pawned your grandmother's wedding ring for drug money. Because I was sick. Because I needed help, not judgment. He was shouting now. And then Emma came along, and suddenly you were the perfect grandmother. Suddenly you had all the time in the world, all the patience, all the love you never gave me. That's not true. Isn't it? Emma got the version of you I needed. You were home for her, present. While I was alone after Dad died, you were working 3 jobs, and I was raising myself. Sarah sat down heavily, the truth of his words crushing her. You're right, she whispered. I failed you. Michael seemed surprised by her admission. He'd come ready for a fight and found agreement instead. I was never there. Sarah continued. After your father died, I was drowning in medical bills, working every hour I could. You were 10 years old and alone most of the time. By the time I realized what I'd lost, you were already gone. Tears rolled down her weathered cheeks. Emma was my second chance. A chance to do it right. And I lost her, too. Michael's anger seemed to deflate. He leaned against the wall, suddenly looking exhausted. Then he noticed the pill bottle in Sarah's coat pocket, the label visible, Oncology Department. He picked it up before she could stop him. Read it. Stage 3, ovarian cancer. When were you going to tell me? Never. Why would you care? Because you're still my mother. He sat down beside her, head in his hands. When did you find out? I haven't officially. I know something's wrong. The weight loss, the pain. But I haven't gone to the doctor because I can't afford the appointment, and I definitely can't afford whatever treatment they'd recommend. Is that why you're doing this, the wolf? Because you're dying anyway? Sarah shook her head. Emma made me promise before she died. She made me promise to save wolves. This is all I have left of her. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Michael said quietly, I loved Emma too. You know that, right? I know. I was getting clean for her. 3 months sober when she... His voice broke. When she died, I blamed you. It was my fault, Sarah said automatically. No. Michael looked at her strangely. It wasn't. But before Sarah could ask what he meant, he stood abruptly. Can I see her ghost? Sarah led him to the recovery room. Ghost lay curled around her 5 cubs, all of them nursing, except Hope, who Sarah had just fed. Michael pressed his hand against the observation window, watching. That one's different, he said, pointing to Hope. She won't survive in the wild. Deformed leg, curved spine. She'll stay here permanently if I can figure out how to pay for it. Michael stared at Hope for a long time. The little cub looked up, as if sensing his gaze, and their eyes met through the glass. She's a fighter, he said softly. Yes, like Emma was. Yes, Michael came every day after that. He'd spend hours watching Hope, and Sarah stopped asking why. Some connections couldn't be explained. Only except by day 20. Sarah's symptoms had worsened. She'd lost 15 pounds. The pain in her abdomen was constant now, requiring over-the-counter painkillers she couldn't really afford. She collapsed one afternoon at the center, and Dr. Helen caught her before she hit the floor. "Hospital now," Helen demanded. "Not until Ghost is ready to be released." "Sarah, you're dying, Churton. I know, but not yet." On day 25, $50,000 appeared in Sarah's bank account. The note said simply, "For Hope and for you, a father." Sarah called Michael immediately. "Did you do this?" "I don't know what you're talking about, Mom." She didn't believe him, but later she'd learned the truth. James Cooper had sold 40 acres of his ranch, land that had been in his family for 3 generations, to pay for Hope's care and Sarah's medical bills. By day 35, Ghost was walking with a permanent limp, but otherwise healthy. All 5 cubs were thriving, except Hope still needed assistance. Helen cleared Ghost for release. "Oh, we should do it soon," Helen said, "before winter fully breaks." Sarah looked outside, where Shadow still waited. He'd lost 15 pounds. His black fur was matted and dull, but every evening at sunset he howled, and the 6-pack members howled in response, and Ghost would stir in her enclosure, listening to her mate's voice carrying across the distance. "Not yet," Sarah said. "He's still waiting." "Sarah, he'll wait forever if you let him. Then maybe forever is what it takes." On day 38, James Cooper appeared at the center, hat in hand. Sarah met him in the parking lot, uncertain whether to expect hostility or something else. "I've been thinking about what you said," James began without preamble, "about Tommy, about justice." He looked old suddenly, older than his 55 years. "I've been angry for 10 years, at wolves, at myself, at God." Sarah waited. "I've been watching Shadow," James continued. "Every day I drive by, and he's still there. 38 days in the snow, not eating, not sleeping, just waiting." His voice cracked. "That's what I should have been for Margaret. Present, loyal. Instead, I was setting traps, hunting wolves, trying to kill my way out of grief. James, I removed all the traps, reported myself to Fish and Wildlife. I'll pay the fines, serve the probation, whatever they want." He met her eyes. "I'm done killing. Sarah, Tommy wouldn't have wanted this. Margaret wouldn't have wanted this." "Thank you," Sarah said simply. "That donation," James said, "for Hope. That was me. Sold the south pasture. James, that's your land. Land doesn't forgive you. Land doesn't give you second chances." He looked toward the building where Hope was recovering. "But maybe, helping that little cub, maybe that's a start." Sarah reached out and squeezed his weathered hand. 2 broken people, standing in the snow, trying to figure out how to carry their grief forward instead of letting it bury them. On day 40, they made the decision. Ghost would be released. Shadow would have to choose return to the wild with Ghost and 4 healthy cubs, or stay in captivity with a Hope, the cub who would never run with a pack. Sarah didn't sleep the night before, wondering what Shadow would choose and whether any choice could be right when they all involved loss. April 1st arrived with unexpected warmth. The snow had started melting, revealing brown grass and the promise of spring. Sarah arrived at the Wildlife Center before dawn, wanting time alone with a Ghost before the media circus began. 200 people were expected at the release site, including reporters from 3 national news networks. Ghost stood in her enclosure, 4 healthy cubs tumbling around her feet. Only Hope remained separated. In the adjacent kennel, where Sarah had been providing round-the-clock care, the deformed cub pressed against the chain-link fence. Crying for her mother, Ghost paced the barrier between them, trying to reach her daughter, unable to understand why this one cub couldn't come close. Sarah's heart broke watching them. I'm sorry, girl," she whispered. "She can't go with you." She entered Ghost's enclosure alone. The white wolf tensed but didn't retreat. Over 40 days, some invisible thread had formed between them, not friendship exactly, but recognition. 2 mothers who'd fought impossible odds. Sarah knelt. Ghost approached cautiously, sniffed her outstretched hand, then did something that made Sarah gasp. She licked Sarah's weathered palm. A wolf's kiss, acceptance, gratitude. "Take care of your babies," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "The ones who can run with you." At 7 in the morning, they brought Shadow to Ghost's enclosure. After 40 days of separation, the reunion was almost too painful to watch. Shadow rushed to Ghost, pressing his body against hers, sniffing every inch of her, checking the scar on her leg, the incision line barely visible through her fur. Ghost nuzzled his neck, making soft sounds Sarah had never heard wolves make. Then Shadow turned to the cubs. He sniffed each one carefully, learning their scent, accepting them. When he reached the 4th cub, the largest male, he gave a gentle nip that made the cub tumble over, a gesture of play that meant family, pack, belonging. But then Shadow heard Hope crying from the adjacent kennel. His head snapped toward the sound. He walked into the fence, dividing the enclosures, and Hope pressed her small body against the chain link, reaching for her father. Shadow began to pace, back to Ghost and the 4 cubs, then to the fence, where Hope waited back and forth, agitated, confused. He barked at the fence, trying to tell Hope to come through, unable to comprehend why she remained separated. Helen stood beside Sarah at the observation window. "This is cruel," Helen said quietly. "We're forcing him to choose." "Nature already made the choice," Sarah replied. "We're just showing him the reality." The transport team arrived at 8. They'd take Ghost and the healthy cubs to her original territory, 40 miles into the wilderness, where the rest of the pack waited. Cameras would film the release for the documentary being made about Sarah's rescue. They loaded Ghost into the transport crate first. She went willingly, exhausted by 40 days of recovery, trusting humans in a way wild wolves shouldn't. The 4 healthy cubs followed, tumbling over each other, curious about the new space. Shadow stood frozen, watching his family loaded into the truck. Hope cried louder from her kennel. Sensing something terrible happening, Sarah made the decision. She opened both enclosures, the one leading to the transport truck and the one where Hope waited alone. Shadow could walk toward the truck, toward Ghost and the 4 cubs who could survive in the wild. Or he could walk toward Hope, toward the cub who would never run with a pack, never hunt, never be truly wild. The entire facility fell silent. Staff members, reporters, even the park superintendent who'd come to witness Sarah's downfall, everyone watched as Shadow stood between 2 doors, between 2 futures. 5 seconds felt like an eternity. Shadow looked at Ghost in the transport crate. She was watching him, waiting. The 4 cubs tumbled around her feet, his legacy, his healthy offspring who would strengthen the pack, continue the bloodline. Then he looked at Hope, the smallest cub, the weakest, the one who would die without constant care. Shadow walked toward Hope. He lay down beside the deformed cub, curled his massive body around her fragile form, and licked her face with infinite gentleness. Then he looked back at Ghost one final time. Their eyes met across the distance, alpha mates who'd bonded for life, now being torn apart by circumstance and choice. Ghost threw her head back and howled. It was a sound of grief, of loss, of unwilling acceptance. Shadow howled back, and in that exchange was everything promise, commitment, goodbye. The transport doors closed. Ghost pressed against the crate's window, watching her mate until the truck pulled away. Shadow didn't move from Hope's side. Sarah collapsed. Michael, who'd arrived early to watch, caught her before she hit the ground around them. The crowd of reporters and staff stood in stunned silence. Some were crying openly. Helen's voice was shaking. I've been a wildlife veterinarian for 20 years. I've never seen that before. The wildlife biologist who'd been observing took off his glasses to wipe his eyes. Wolf pairs mate for life. He just gave up everything his mate, his healthy offspring, his freedom. He chose the one who needed him most. Michael helped Sarah to a bench. She was sobbing too hard to speak. He held her like he hadn't since he was a small child, and whispered, "He did what you did, Mom. He stayed with the broken one, like you stayed with me, like you stayed with Emma." 2 hours later, they reached the release site, deep in Yellowstone's backcountry. The 6-pack members who'd waited 40 days emerged from the tree line immediately, tails wagging, excited. The transport crate opened. Ghost stepped out first, testing her wounded leg on natural ground, her head lifted, scenting the air, pine, earth, freedom. The 4 cubs tumbled out behind her, overwhelmed by space and sky and endless wilderness. The pack surrounded them, greeting Ghost with nuzzles and whines, sniffing the cubs, accepting them instantly. Within minutes, they'd formed a protective circle around the newcomers. The pack was whole again. Almost Ghost stood apart for a moment, looking back toward where they'd come from, toward where Shadow remained 40 miles away with their 5th cub. She howled once, a sound that carried across valleys and mountains. Sarah stood with the crowd of reporters, cameras filming everything. One reporter pushed a microphone toward her. "How does it feel?" Sarah couldn't find words. How did it feel to keep a promise 3 years late, to save a family while losing everything, her job, her pension, possibly her freedom if criminal charges were filed? "Like I finally did something right," she managed. "Tell us about Emma." Another reporter prompted gently. So Sarah did. Standing in the wilderness with cameras rolling, she told Emma's story. The car accident that wasn't an accident. The 3 days in the hospital. The promise extracted from a grandmother's grief. The white wolf in the documentary that had captured a 7-year-old's imagination. "She made me promise to save wolves," Sarah said, tears streaming, Ghost and her cubs. "That's my promise kept." The video would be viewed 50 million times within a week. The hashtag #SaveTheWolves would trend for days, but Sarah didn't know that yet. She only knew that Ghost's pack was disappearing into the forest. 11 wolves now, instead of 8, stronger for their new members. Back at the Wildlife Center, Shadow hadn't moved from Hope's side. Staff brought food. He ate minimally. They brought water. He drank. But mostly, he just lay with the cub who would be his permanent charge, who would never see the wilderness, who would live and die in captivity because her body couldn't survive what nature demanded. Michael spent the afternoon watching them through the observation window. James Cooper joined him, the two men who'd found unlikely kinship standing together in silence. "That's what love looks like," James said finally. "Not the pretty kind. The kind that costs everything." Michael nodded, unable to speak. 2 days later, the Park Service made their decision. Sarah, Dr. Helen, and James were called to a meeting with the superintendent and the regional director. Sarah expected termination, criminal charges, the end of everything. The superintendent cleared his throat. "Dr. Mitchell, your actions violated our non-intervention policy. I know. However, circumstances were exceptional. The injury was human-caused. Mr. Cooper has admitted to setting illegal traps, which directly led to Ghost's condition." He glanced at James, who sat with his hat in his lap, accepting responsibility. "Furthermore," the regional director added, "public response has been overwhelming. We've received $500,000 in donations, specifically designated for wolf conservation. 2 million people have signed petitions supporting your actions." Sarah blinked. I don't understand." "You're not being fired, Dr. Mitchell. You're being promoted." The superintendent slid a folder across the table. "We're creating a new position, Wolf-Human Coexistence Coordinator. Your job will be public education, conflict prevention, and community outreach. Salary is $60,000 a year. The position is funded entirely by the donations your rescue generated." Sarah stared at the paperwork, unable to process. "I don't deserve this." "The public disagrees. You showed that compassion and policy can coexist, that sometimes the most right thing requires breaking rules designed for different circumstances." Helen's case was reviewed by the Veterinary Board. 5,000 veterinarians signed a letter of support. The board ruled exceptional circumstances and issued no punishment. James received $50,000 in fines and 5 years probation, which he accepted without complaint. But none of that mattered as much as what Sarah learned when she finally went to the doctor 3 days after Ghost's release. The diagnosis she'd been avoiding, the confirmation of what her body had been trying to tell her for months. Stage 4, ovarian cancer, metastasized to liver and lungs. "How long?" Sarah asked the oncologist. Patricia Morrison looked at the scans, her expression grave. "Without treatment, weeks, maybe a month. With aggressive chemotherapy, 3 to 6 months. But the treatment is brutal. And quality of life? No treatment," Sarah said. Michael, who'd insisted on attending the appointment, grabbed her hand. "Mom, you have to fight this." "I'm not fighting," Sarah said gently. "I'm accepting. There's a difference." She looked at Dr. Morrison. "I want hospice care at my cabin. I want to spend my last days looking at mountains, not hospital ceilings. Mom, please. Michael, I'm 62 years old. I've kept my promise to Emma. I've reconnected with you. I've saved Ghost's family. She squeezed his hand. I'm ready, but I need more time with you. We don't always get what we need, baby. We get what we get, and we make it count. If Michael broke down, the son finally allowed to grieve in front of the mother who'd failed him, who'd tried to save him, who'd never stopped being his mother, even when he'd stopped being her son. What about Hope? He asked through tears. She needs you. Sarah smiled. She has Shadow. And Michael, I think maybe she has you too. The hospice nurse helped Michael set up the hospital bed in Sarah's cabin living room. Sarah had refused the bedroom, wanting windows, wanting to see the mountains where Ghost now ran free. Her small cabin, unchanged in 15 years, held the accumulated grief of multiple lifetimes. Robert's reading chair still in the corner. Michael's childhood drawings in a box under the stairs. Emma's room as she'd left it 3 years ago. Michael moved in without being asked. He quit his job at Cooper Ranch, and James understood without explanation. Family comes first, James said. I learned that too late. You're learning it while there's still time. The first week passed in a blur of medication schedules and hospice visits. Sarah's bucket list was short. See Ghost one more time. Watch Hope walk without pain. Tell Michael everything she'd never said. The park rangers tracking Ghost's pack via GPS coordinates brought video footage every other day. Michael would set up his laptop, and Sarah would watch from her bed as Ghost led the pack through deep forest. Her limp barely noticeable now, the 4 cubs growing larger and bolder. They were thriving. She's okay, Sarah whispered, watching Ghost teach the cubs to hunt a rabbit. They're all okay. That's what you wanted, right? All I needed to do. Helen arranged special permission for Hope to visit the cabin. Michael drove the hour and a half each way, bringing the deformed cub in a specialized carrier. Hope was learning to walk with a custom leg brace, making progress that defied expectations. When Michael brought Hope inside, the cub recognized Sarah's scent immediately. Oh, she dragged herself to the hospital bed, pulling with her front legs, the braced rear leg awkward but functional. Sarah's hand dropped to Hope's head, fingers tangling in soft fur. You're going to be okay, sweet girl, Sarah murmured. You're a fighter. Hope laid her head on the bed, and for 20 minutes they stayed like that, the dying woman and the broken wolf, both surviving against odds that said they shouldn't. In week 2, Sarah began writing letters. Her handwriting, once neat, had become shaky, but she forced herself to write what needed saying. The letter to Michael was hardest. She wrote and rewrote it 5 times before settling on truth. Michael, I failed you as a mother. I know that now. When your father died, something in me broke. I became hard, distant, focused on survival instead of living. I worked 3 jobs and left you alone. By the time I realized what I'd lost, you were already gone. Emma gave me a second chance at motherhood, and I tried to do it right that time. But I lost her too. Maybe I was never meant to be a mother. But Michael, if I could go back, I'd choose you every time. I'd do it all differently. I love you. I always have. I just didn't know how to show it. Forgive yourself for Emma, forgive me for failing you, and please live, not just exist truly live." She gave him permission to read it while she watched. Michael sat in Robert's old chair, tears streaming as he read his mother's confession. When he full finished, he came to her bedside. "Mom, I forgive you. Do you mean it? I was angry for so long." His voice broke. "But I understand now. You did the best you could with what you had, and you never gave up on me, even when I gave up on myself. Did I do right by Emma?" Michael took her hand. "You gave Emma 2 years of pure love. You were the mother to her I needed you to be for me. That matters. It counts. I should have been that for you. Maybe. But we can't change the past. We can only—" He stopped, struggling. "We can only make the present count." They sat together as afternoon light faded, the mountains outside turning gold, then purple, then dark. The pain grew worse in week 3 despite increasing morphine doses. Sarah slept 20 hours a day now, her body consuming itself, the cancer spreading with ruthless efficiency. She'd lost 30 pounds. Her skin had taken on a yellowish cast. Her eyes, once bright, seemed to sink into her skull. Lucid moments became precious and rare. During one, she asked Michael about Jennifer, his ex-wife, the woman who'd abandoned Emma as an infant. "Have you talked to her?" "She's in rehab, 6 months sober now." "Good?" Sarah's voice was barely audible. "Everyone deserves a second chance. Like you gave me. Like I should have given you sooner." Sarah's eyes closed. "Maybe when I'm gone, you could try again with the Jennifer. Maybe. You deserve love, Michael. You deserve a family. Promise me you'll try." "I promise, Mom. And Hope, you'll take care of Hope." "I will. She's special, like Emma was special." Michael didn't ask what she meant. Some connections transcended the explanation. That night, or maybe it was early morning, time had stopped meaning much. Sarah woke to see a figure at her window. Shadow. Somehow. Impossibly. The black wolf stood outside her cabin, 90 miles from the wildlife center where he should be. Shadow looked at her through the glass, amber eyes catching the moonlight. "Hey, boy," Sarah whispered, "you came to say goodbye." Shadow tilted his head back and howled. In the distance, impossibly far away, other wolves answered. Ghost's pack. Sarah thought, they were all here, all her wolves, come to see her home. "Thank you," she told Shadow, "for staying with Hope, for choosing her." Shadow held her gaze for a long moment, then turned and disappeared into the darkness. Michael woke to find Sarah smiling, staring at the window. "Mom, you okay?" "I saw Shadow and heard Ghost's pack." Michael looked out the window, nothing but darkness and trees. "Mom, there's no one there." "I know." Sarah's smile didn't fade. "But I saw them anyway." Michael understood. Morphine could create hallucinations, but maybe grief could create comfort. Maybe the mind gave dying people what they needed to let go. James visited the next day, bringing flowers from Margaret's garden that he'd maintained alone for 8 years. He sat beside Sarah's bed, this man who'd been her enemy and become something like a brother. "I want to tell you something," James said, "about Tommy." Sarah tried to focus through the medication haze. "I've spent 10 years blaming wolves, but watching Shadow these past weeks, seeing him choose Hope, seeing him give up everything for the weakest cub, James's voice broke. That's what I should have been. For Tommy, for Margaret, I was so consumed by anger I forgot how to love. It's not too late, Sarah whispered. It is for them, but maybe not for me. I'm donating 50 acres to the Wildlife Center for sanctuary space, for wolves like Hope, who can't be wild. James. It's what Margaret would have wanted, what Tommy would have wanted. He took Sarah's hand. You taught me that, Sarah. You showed me that saving something broken is worth everything, even if it costs you everything. I didn't do it for recognition. I know. You did it for Emma, for a promise. That's what makes it matter. After James left, Sarah asked Michael to help her to Emma's room. It took 15 minutes to move 20 feet, Sarah's body nearly spent, but she insisted. Emma's room was frozen in time. Drawings on the walls, books on the shelf. The bed made with the unicorn comforter Emma had loved on the nightstand. A photograph Emma at 6 years old, grinning at the camera, missing both front teeth. Sarah sat on the bed, picking up Emma's favorite stuffed wolf. I kept my promise, baby girl, she whispered. I saved them just like you asked. Michael stood in the doorway, giving her this private moment. I'm ready now, Sarah said. I'm ready to see her again. That night, Sarah's breathing changed. The hospice nurse, checking vitals at midnight, called Michael. It's time, maybe hours, maybe less. Michael climbed into the hospital bed beside his mother, holding her like she'd held him 35 years ago when he was born. Role reversal. The child cradling the parent at the end, just as the parent had cradled the child at the beginning. I love you, Mom, he whispered. Sarah's eyes fluttered open one last time. Love you too, baby. Outside, in the darkness, 90 miles away, Shadow lifted his head from where he lay beside Hope and howled. At the Wildlife Center, staff would later report that every wolf in the facility joined the chorus. And in the wilderness, Ghost's pack answered, 11 voices rising in harmony. The wolves were saying goodbye. Michael felt his mother's breathing slow, felt her body relax into something that wasn't quite sleep, but wasn't quite death either. That space between, where souls prepared to leave. Dawn was breaking over the mountains, light touching the peaks first, before spreading down to the valleys. Sarah had always loved the mornings. She took one more breath, then none. Michael held her as the sun rose, whispering, Thank you for everything, for trying, for never giving up, for showing me what it means to keep a promise. The time was 6:47 in the morning, April 28th. Sarah Mitchell was 62 years old. She died looking at mountains, held by her son, having kept a promise to a granddaughter who'd been gone 3 years, but who, in ways that mattered, had never really left. On day 25 of Sarah's hospice care, Michael sat beside her bed, watching her sleep. The morphine kept her comfortable, but stole hours from the precious time they had left. When her eyes finally opened, clouded with medication but still present, Michael knew he couldn't wait any longer. Mom, I need to tell you something about the accident, about Emma. Sarah's brow furrowed, trying to focus. What about it? You weren't driving. The words hung in the air like smoke. Sarah blinked slowly, processing. What do you mean? Of course I was driving. No, Mom, you weren't. Michael's hands shook as he prepared to confess the truth he'd carried for 3 years. I was... The morphine haze lifted slightly from Sarah's eyes, replaced by confusion and something that might have been fear. Michael, I don't understand. December 20th, 2020. You remember what happened that day? Sarah closed her eyes. I'll never forget. I was taking Emma to her friend's birthday party. The roads were icy. I lost control. We hit a tree. Emma was in the back seat. Her voice broke. It was my fault. I killed her. That's what you told everyone. That's what you told the police. But it's not what happened. Michael stood, paced to the window, unable to look at his mother while he spoke. I showed up at your house that afternoon. High. I'd been clean for a week, but I'd relapsed. I needed money. You refused. We argued. Emma was there, watching, scared. I don't remember. You blocked it out, Mom. Or maybe the trauma just erased it. But I remember every second. His voice cracked. I grabbed your car keys. I was going to steal the car, sell it for drug money. Emma jumped in the back seat, screaming for me not to go. You chased us, jumped in the passenger seat, begging me to stop. Sarah's breathing quickened, the heart monitor beside her bed reflecting her rising panic. I drove anyway, high out of my mind, barely able to see straight. You were yelling at me to pull over. Emma was crying in the back. I was driving too fast on icy roads, and He couldn't finish. You lost control, Sarah whispered. We hit the tree. Emma was thrown against the front seat because I hadn't made her buckle up. You were knocked unconscious. When you came to in the ambulance, you told them you'd been driving. You took the blame. To protect you. Yes. Michael turned to face her, tears streaming. You told police you were driving, that Emma wasn't properly secured, that it was your fault. You let everyone believe you killed your own granddaughter to protect the son who actually killed her. And Sarah's tears mixed with the perspiration of fever. You were high. You would have gone to prison. I deserved prison. Instead, you took the guilt, the blame, everyone in town whispering about how Sarah Mitchell killed Emma, the looks in the grocery store, the way people avoided you. Michael collapsed beside her bed. Why? Why did you do it? Because you're my son, Sarah said simply. I'd already lost you to drugs. If you'd gone to prison, I would have lost you forever. I couldn't bear that, so you let them hate you instead. Better they hate me than lose you completely. And Michael, she reached for his hand with effort. I did lose control of the situation. I got in that car. I didn't call police. I thought I could talk you down, stop you. I was wrong. So yes, it was my fault too. Michael shook his head violently. No, don't do that. Don't take my guilt onto yourself. I killed Emma. I killed your granddaughter. I destroyed everything. And you saved me anyway. That's what mothers do. I got sober the next day. Mom, the day after Emma's funeral, I've been clean for 3 years. Every single day. I wanted to tell you the truth, but I was too ashamed. And then, when I saw you saving Ghost, I realized, his voice broke completely, you were still saving me. You never gave up. Even when I did. Sarah pulled him closer with the little strength she had left. The accident wasn't murder, Michael. It was tragedy. It was addiction. It was 1,000 small failures that led to one terrible moment. But you've been sober for 3 years. You've changed. Emma's death wasn't meaningless if it made you want to live. How can you forgive me? Because you're my son, and because holding on to anger would poison what little time we have left. She touched his face. Emma wouldn't want you to destroy yourself over this. She loved you, Michael. She talked about you constantly. Asked when her daddy was coming home. The word daddy broke something in Michael. He sobbed against his mother's hospital bed. 35 years old, but feeling like a child again. Sarah held him as best she could. This son she'd failed and saved and failed and saved again. When the tears finally subsided, there was a knock at the door. James Cooper entered, but he wasn't alone. An elderly Native American man walked beside him, moving with the careful dignity of advanced age. "Sarah, this is Thomas White Eagle," James said. "From the Crow Nation. He asked to meet you." Thomas was 82 years old, his face deeply lined, his long silver hair braided. He carried himself with quiet authority. "I needed to meet the woman who saved the white wolf," he said, his voice strong despite his age. Sarah tried to sit up straighter. "I'm honored." Thomas sat in the chair Michael vacated. 120 years ago, my great-grandmother saved a white wolf. Trappers had shot it and left it to die. She found it, nursed it back to health. That wolf stayed near our village for 20 years, protecting our children, warning of danger. When the wolf died, she was buried with full honors by our people. That's a beautiful story, dear," Sarah said. "It's more than a story. It's connected to you." Thomas pulled papers from his jacket. The wildlife geneticist tested Ghost's DNA. She is a direct descendant of that white wolf. In 120 years, there have only been 5 white wolves documented in this region, all in the same genetic line. And Sarah stared at the genetic charts she couldn't quite focus on. "Ghost is descended from the wolf your great-grandmother saved." "Yes, and in our tradition, when you save a life, that spirit guides you in the next world. But there's more." Thomas leaned forward. "My great-grandmother's name was White Cloud. She had a granddaughter who died young, 7 years old, drowned in a river." Sarah's breath caught. White Cloud was consumed by grief. She said saving that wolf was the only thing that kept her alive after losing her granddaughter. The wolf gave her purpose when she wanted to die. "Emma," Sarah whispered, "Emma gave me the same gift. Your granddaughter knew you would blame yourself for her death. She made you promise to save wolves because she knew you couldn't save yourself. She was saving you even as she was dying." Well, Michael, standing by the window, understood suddenly. Emma sent you to Ghost. She knew you needed to save something, to feel worthy again. Thomas nodded. The circle completes every 120 years. A grandmother loses a granddaughter. A white wolf needs saving, and in saving the wolf, the grandmother saves herself. Sarah closed her eyes, tears slipping down her temples. "She forgave me. Emma forgave me. She never blamed you, Mom," Michael said. "And now, you need to forgive yourself." "I can't." "Yes, you can, because if you can forgive me for actually causing her death, you can forgive yourself for trying to prevent it." Michael knelt beside her. "Promise me you'll live your last days without that guilt. Promise me you'll let it go." Sarah looked at her son, clean, sober, present, finally the man he was meant to be. She looked at Thomas, carrying a story 120 years old. She looked at James, who'd learned to forgive wolves and himself. "I promise," she whispered, "I'll let it go." Thomas stood, placed his hand on Sarah's head in blessing. "Ghost will guide you home now, and Emma will be waiting." After Thomas and James left, Michael climbed back into bed beside his mother. "Emma gave you Ghost. Ghost gave you purpose. And that purpose brought me back to you. Everything's connected. Mom, nothing was wasted." Sarah smiled, really smiled, for the first time in 3 years. "Tell me about Jennifer, about trying again. She's 6 months sober. We've been talking. Good. You deserve love. You deserve family. What about hope? Hope is your second chance, like Emma was mine." Sarah's eyes were closing, exhaustion overwhelming her. "She needs you, and I think you need her too. I'll take care of her, I promise." "I know you will, baby. I know." 3 months after Sarah Mitchell passed peacefully in her cabin on April the 28th, Michael stood at the grand opening of the Sarah Mitchell Memorial Wolf Sanctuary. Built on 40 acres James Cooper had donated, funded by $2 million raised through the viral video of Ghost's rescue. The sanctuary would house Hope and 3 other non-releasable wolves. Shadow lived there permanently with Hope. The black wolf had become Hope's constant companion, teaching her to navigate the world with her twisted leg and curved spine. Together, they'd become something unprecedented, a therapy team for children with disabilities. Michael served as the sanctuary's director. He'd found his calling in the work his mother had started, educating the public about wolf-human coexistence, preventing conflicts before they required rescue. James volunteered 3 days a week, teaching visitors about ranching and wildlife management, about how the two could coexist. Hope, now 9 months old, wore a custom prosthetic designed by veterinary engineers. She walked with a slight limp but moved with surprising grace. Her first therapy visit was with a girl named Sophia, 8 years old, who had cerebral palsy and used a wheelchair. "She's like me," Sophia whispered, watching Hope navigate the sanctuary with her braced leg. "She's a fighter," Michael said, kneeling beside the wheelchair, "just like you." Sophia reached through the fence. Hope approached carefully, sniffed the girl's hand, then licked her fingers. Sophia laughed the first time her mother had heard that sound in months. In the wilderness, Ghost's pack thrived. The 4 cubs from that impossible birth were now juveniles, learning to hunt, establishing their place in pack hierarchy. Ghost had mated again with a new alpha male, was pregnant with her second litter. The pack numbered 14 wolves now, one of the largest in Yellowstone. Human-wolf conflicts in the region had decreased at 80% since Sarah's rescue made national news. Jennifer completed rehab in June. She and Michael reconciled slowly, carefully. 2 broken people learning to trust again. They married in August at the sanctuary. A small ceremony with 20 guests. Hope served as flower girl, wearing a wreath of wildflowers around her neck. Sarah's empty chair sat in the front row, her photograph on the seat, watching her son promise forever to someone he'd lost and found again. They planned to adopt. Jennifer couldn't have biological children due to complications from her addiction years. "Maybe that's okay," she told Michael. "Maybe we're meant to save a child who needs saving, like your mother saved you, like Shadow saved Hope." Sarah's story became an Emmy-winning documentary. Her rescue inspired wolf-human coexistence programs nationwide. Montana passed Sarah's Law, allowing emergency intervention for wildlife injuries caused by human activity. Her legacy spread further than she could have imagined. On a warm July afternoon, Michael visited the cemetery where Sarah lay beside Emma. Hope came with him, she always did. The wolf cub, no longer tiny but not yet fully grown, lay between the two graves, as if connecting grandmother and great-granddaughter across the veil. Emma's headstone read, "Age 7, forever loved." Sarah's read, "She kept her promise." Miguel placed wildflowers on both graves and read the words aloud, his voice steady. "We all did, Mom, me, James, Ghost, Shadow, Hope. We all kept our promises." Hope looked toward the mountains where Ghost's pack roamed free. In the distance, a wolf howled. Hope lifted her head and howled back, her voice joining the chorus, part of something larger than herself. Michael smiled through tears. "Thank you, Mom, for everything, for never giving up, for showing me that love means staying even when it costs everything." The sun set over the mountains, painting the sky orange and gold. Michael, Jennifer, and Hope walked back to the car. A new family built from broken pieces, held together by the promises kept to a woman who taught them all what it meant to save a life. 2 years later, Michael and Jennifer stood in the same cemetery with their adopted daughter, Emma Sarah Mitchell, age 5. The little girl fed Hope treats. While Michael told the story, his daughter requested every visit. "Tell me about Grandma Sarah and the white wolf." Michael smiled, the pain of loss softened by peep into something sweeter, a memory instead of grief. "Okay, sweetheart, it starts like this. Once upon a time, there was a woman who made a promise to a little girl, and that promise changed everything. In the wilderness, Ghost's pack howled their evening song. Hope, lying between the graves of the two people she'd never met, but who'd made her life possible, joined the chorus." Little Emma laughed, clapping her hands. "Again! Daddy, tell it again." Well, and Michael did, because some stories deserve to be told again and again, passed down through generations, keeping alive the memory of a woman who'd risked everything to keep a promise, who'd saved a family of wolves, and, in doing so, saved them all. The end. Sarah Mitchell had buried a husband, lost a son to addiction, and held her granddaughter as she died. At 62, drowning in medical debt and grief, she could have chosen bitterness. Instead, she chose one final promise to save a dying wolf and her unborn cubs. That choice cost her everything: her job, her health, her last precious months. But it gave her something priceless: reconciliation with the son who'd hated her, forgiveness for the guilt that had been killing her, and proof that her life had mattered. Sometimes our greatest regrets become our greatest redemptions. Sometimes the broken things we save end up saving us. Sarah's story asks us all, what promises have we left unkept? What relationships have we abandoned as too late to fix? What legacy are we leaving while we still have time? Her son Michael spent 10 years running from his mother, convinced she'd never forgive him. He was wrong. Sarah spent 3 years believing she'd failed everyone she loved. She was wrong, too. They found their way back to each other because one dying woman refused to give up on love, even when love had cost her everything. Is there someone in your life you need to reconcile with before it's too late? What promise have you been avoiding that your heart keeps whispering you should keep?